received a letter from Crispin Blunt, the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Justice, and from John Drew, the Chief Executive of the Youth Justice Board for England and Wales, enclosing their joint written evidence from the Ministry of Justice and the Youth Justice Board for England and Wales. And we're grateful for that, and I'm very grateful for the attention which the Minister and the YJB have given to this hearing. John Drew, as I've said, is the Chief Executive of the Youth Justice Board for England and Wales, took up his post in January 2010. He was the Director of Housing and Community Services in Redbridge, I think. He was Chair of the Youth Offending Team Management Board and Crime Reduction Partnership for several years, led the establishment of the Redbridge Children's Trust in 2003. His earlier career was with various councils, as widely apart as Essex and Lancashire, and he started working with young offenders so long ago that I won't tell you which year. He has a wealth of experience. His early career was largely in the area of youth justice work, and we're very grateful to you, Mr. Drew, for coming to give evidence this afternoon. Do you want to give an introduction to your evidence?
If I might, my Lord.
Please do. Don't call me my lord.
Well, I'm very conscious of the setting.
Hold on. Anything will do.
Yes, if I might just say a very few things, and then we will endeavour to answer any questions you may have. I mean, firstly, on behalf of the Youth Justice Board and the Ministry of Justice, I'd like to thank you for the invitation, thank Howard for the invitation and the opportunity to set out our take on the issues under consideration. And if I could also pass my Minister's apology that he wasn't able to attend. At one stage he thought he would, and he was very keen to attend. And as you said, it is the case that the evidence that we submitted is joint evidence on behalf both of the Ministry and the Youth Justice Board, and the Minister himself personally signed it off, which is why it was relatively late in coming to you. If I could say just a very few words by way of introduction. The first thing I think to say is that from our perspective, once a child is sent to custody, either a consequence of being sentenced or remanded, the issue of safeguarding of the child's well-being is our first priority. And our contention is that since the YJB assumed its responsibilities for the secure state in 2000, very substantial strides have been made in terms of developing both a more effective and a safer custodial environment for children and young people across all three parts of the custodial estate. And amongst other things, if I could draw to your attention a statistic which speaks, I think, significantly about our children's focus. The estate that we inherited in 2000 was one in which 80% of all children under custody were accommodated with adults, and only 20% were in establishments that solely catered for children and young people. The current statistic is that 80% of all children and young people are now in dedicated facilities which solely cater for the under 18-year-olds, and only 20% are still held with adults. And our ambition is to resolve that. That of itself is not by any means the end of the story. In fact, it's only the starting point. But I hope it says something for our commitment to developing a dedicated estate for children and young people, which is centred on their needs. We believe that as part of that, the developments over the last 10 years, we've been able to make significant strides both in the physical environment, both in the development of specialist provision for children and young people in custody, and also in the way in which we have developed the assessment processes, both obviously when they're in the community, but also when they're in custody, in order to better meet their needs, and in particular to focus on our primary aim, which is the prevention of reoffending amongst young people. The other main overarching point that I draw to your attention, I know you're very aware of it, sir, is the reduction, particularly in the last 5 years, in the number of young people in custody. Very crudely, at the time that you published your report, 3,200 young people were in one or another form of custody. Last night we had 1,940, and that's a progress, particularly in the last 2 and a bit years, that we're keen to see developed, because whatever happens in custody, one of our primary objectives is to ensure that actually custody is used only as the legislation intends, as a last resort. And one of the best ways that we can safeguard children is to ensure that only those where custody is unavoidable find themselves in custody. If I could say that I think the progress that we've made, that I've alluded to, and which we will test in the evidence, is also exemplified in Mr. Hardwick's evidence, and I know you're going to get an opportunity to examine his evidence at your next hearing. Progress that we're particularly proud about include the adoption of restraint minimisation strategies across the whole estate. Obviously, they're still in their relative infancy, but we believe over time that they will produce real gains across the estate. The acknowledgement that we've now had from all of our providers that we should move to a risk-based approach to the search of children, which I know was an issue that concerned you greatly in your first report. Also, some withdrawal of some unsafe techniques of restraint for children, but more importantly, the work that the Restraint Accreditation Board has been engaged upon for some time now, and I know you want to come back to me about the pace of that change, but towards the overall objective of creating a new and, we believe, safer system of restraint, which in time will spread throughout the estate, and we'll talk more, no doubt, about that. Something that I would like in particular to say and to acknowledge is that in undertaking all of this work, the Youth Justice Board has been immensely helped by a whole range of independent organisations and bodies, including the Howard League, who, coming from different perspectives, have nevertheless made sure that the spotlight is on the position of children in custody. We think that's immensely important, that it should be there, and it's only through that spotlight that we continue to be able to make the progress that we've made. In particular, I would focus on the work of the two independent reviewers of restraint appointed by the government in 2007, Peter Smallridge and Andrew Williamson, who continue to work for the government, both having produced their original report on a review of restraint, to oversee the implementation of that. And then also for the work of all the members of the Restraint Accreditation Board, which is chaired by Professor Sue Bailey, and which, as I say, we will no doubt talk more about. Can I just end by saying, I'm conscious, having said all those things, that it's very easy to characterise what I just said as sounding complacent, and I hope that we will manage to dispel any fear you might have in relation to that. We are acutely aware there is a long way for us to go in relation to safeguarding children while they are in custody, just as there is a long way for us to go in terms of our overarching objective of reducing offending and reoffending by children. But at the same time, I think it is important, whatever one's critique of the current arrangements, to acknowledge that there have been significant strides taken, and perhaps the debate becomes more generally about the pace of change, although I appreciate that there remain particular features of our current system in relation to restraint that not everyone will agree with and some will wish to challenge, and I recognise those as legitimate areas of public debate. Can I conclude by introducing my two colleagues? On my right is Ray Hill, who is the YJB's Director of Secure Accommodation. Ray joined us last summer. His previous background for the 4 years prior to that was as Governing Governor of HMP YOI Hindley. And prior to that, he's got 13 years of experience within the prison service in a range of roles, which began working as a residential officer in the YOI at Thorncross. And on my left is Laura Kaplan, who's been with the YJB for nearly 5 years, whose most recent post has been that of Secure Services Development Manager, which means that she's very across all the sorts of